Sorry.
No, no problem.
Um,
Got a laptop with me today. It's gonna make it a little
okay,
easier.
now we're live.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. It is 8:01, so I think we will start the meeting. The first thing we're going to do is approve the minutes from last month. There were minutes that were taken and distributed. There were some edits, and the date of that meeting was September 22nd. And so I'm going to ask if I will propose that we approve them. Is there a second?
I second.
Second, great. Okay, we're going to go from left to right on my screen. So Artie,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Rosie,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Judd.
Yes.
Okay, the minutes are approved. So the first new matter that we have before us tonight is Dawn Fitzpatrick. Is there somebody appearing on that matter?
They should be here shortly.
Okay. They've not logged in yet.
No, here they are.
Oh, okay. Great.
Good evening, everyone. Chuck Willett with Brooks and Filatico. I'm from Filatico Architecture, the architect on the job and representing the Fitzpatricks.
Great. All righty. So what do you have for us tonight?
So basically, we're in front of you after a couple go-arounds on the planning board for two reasons. One is for coverage and one is for height. Due to the uniqueness of both the size and the slope of the site, we ran into two situations that we wanted to present to you. The first one is for coverage. The existing coverage on the property is significantly higher than not only what is allowed, but also what we are proposing. We're proposing an actual huge decrease in the lot coverage from what is there. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, please.
While he's doing that, I just have a question because I noticed this when I was reviewing the materials. The application does mention the two variances, but the notice to neighbors only references the height variance. I don't know if that's an issue or not.
That I will have to look into real quick. So on the coverage portion, I think this is
I mean, I would say normally grant this.
I'm sorry.
So, Artie, could you repeat that?
As I was saying, that historically, it can present a problem, particularly if we approve the variances that you're looking for, and that someone down the road comes back and challenges that and says, I never received notice of that second variance that you granted, and they could look to set aside the whole thing. So keep that in mind as we move forward.
Yeah. So what variances are you looking for tonight?
So one on coverage and just a ruling on steep slopes.
So you're one for coverage and one for what?
The steep slopes.
The steep
Due to
slope.
the-
So is that a height
Correct.
variance? Okay, so that's height. And
Correct.
those were both noticed to the neighbors or not?
I don't have that letter in front of me at the moment. I can get it momentarily.
Okay, yeah. Let's just make sure we do that because Artie is right. If the neighbors haven't been properly noticed, then we need to kick this down the road another month because it's important that everybody knows what we're doing here.
Understood.
Great.
So on the coverage specifically, this is a document that is prepared both by our office and Hudson Engineering. I think it tells the story about the existing at the lower table. The total coverage on the property now is 11,508 square feet, where the allowable coverage is 8,425. We're before you asking for allowable coverage of 9,054, which is approximately only 7.5% over coverage. The hardship that we're stating for this is due to the topography on this property, which is very substantial. Our overage is almost directly in line with the number that you see here on proposed walls of 615 square feet.
Mhm.
I have Howard on the line from the landscape architect's office. and he can speak to that and the challenges of actually siting the house, the landscaping within the topography on this site.
Can I ask if we just resolve that first issue, because otherwise we're gonna listen to you for no reason.
Yeah,
quite frankly.
that's a good idea. Let's figure out.
Okay, 1 second, please. Oh, that's the letters from neighbors. 1 second, I'm gonna go log into the server.
Sure.
I'm just downloading it now. So download. So in it, it specifically says the first variance concerns lot coverage, and the second paragraph says the second variance concerns the overall height.
All right, good. Okay, thank you.
Would
So
you
it
like
has
to-
been, and that service has been made to all the neighbors, and you're going to get those proof of service to the village.
Yeah.
Okay. Terrific.
That's in the notice, not the application, correct? Because in the package we're seeing, the notice of public hearing only mentions the height issue. That's,
Notice of public hearing. Yeah, that's interesting. You're right. And then on our agenda, it definitely says height, but in the package itself, it only says,
I mean, I know, there are letters from a lot of neighbors who all were very favorable. I don't want to hold
Right,
it
right,
up unnecessarily, but I think the notice that I see is just the height.
yeah.
I mean, the problem is that this is how we do it. This is the protocol that we do. And the notice not just extends to the neighbors, obviously, but everybody in the community.
Right.
Might very well
That's
want
the
to-
problem. The neighbors are clearly on notice, but the public is not. I'm hesitant to go forward under those circumstances just because this is not what we're supposed to be doing everything with complete transparency to the community. And if the community is not on notice, that is a problem. So I would be in favor of maybe adjourning this for a month, properly noticing the public, and then coming back and getting at it in November. Do any other board members have any thoughts on that?
Can we be clear on where this error happened and how?
I would imagine, because I'm looking at my screen, I don't have the papers in front of me, but I would imagine it was on your end because I think you fill out the application.
So the application and the letter both are the same. They both have both on them.
Ken, you have it in front of you? Can you,
Can I have it in front of me too? What page are you on? Oh, you printed it out.
I think it's the second page of the PDF that's available online.
Right. I don't know if you can read it from my holding it up.
But that notice of public hearing was from what?
What do you mean?
notice of public hearing? Yeah. You're right, it's only height, not coverage. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm
concern I have. I don't know if this is what's actually mailed out or not, and I don't frankly know how it gets put in the mail. But
That's not in the mail. The mail is the certificate letters, and I can pull up you a copy of.
Right, no, that's clearly not what's in the mail, right? So the question is, the neighbors have been noticed that it
Oh,
is,
absolutely, and the application
Right.
is accurate. Our office did not have anything to do with that notice, to my knowledge.
okay.
No one's placing blame at this point.
Right.
I don't think
No,
we need to
no,
do an
it's not
investigation right
that
now.
way.
But the mere fact is that we can figure this out so it doesn't happen again, obviously. But it's clear that it's a defective notice then to a member of the public who's not getting the mailing. They would not have had notice of the coverage issue. And it's a significant issue, quite frankly. I understand that you're removing, but you're changing out things at grade for a structure. So there's a little bit more to this application than simply reducing the number, quite frankly. And I think it's something that should be, but they should all be done, whether it's that major or not that major, should be done the way it's supposed to be done. And that's proper notice to the public.
The month though is not insignificant for us. That's the point I would just like to make.
We understand that. We respect that. We're not happy about this, quite frankly. But I just think it's just the way it has to be done. That's my recommendation to the chair. Obviously, it's her decision.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, because especially we're being asked, it's a trickier issue than a straightforward coverage issue as well. So I think it's kind of important that this all be done out in the open. And so I'm going to make the recommendation, or I guess I'm going to move that we adjourn this until next month, so it's properly noticed and everybody.
May I make one?
Yeah.
May I make an additional request?
Yes.
Since we're all here and
Yeah.
you could hear the hearing portion, or the height portion. Is that something that we could go through with? So if you recommended and wanted modified changes to that, we would have time to do so. Since that item.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to want to grant any variances. I think that should be done as a package, but if you would like to give us sort of a preview, we can give you an advisory opinion so that you maybe have some ideas going forward if there's going to need to be changes.
I think that's the least we should do if the board doesn't want.
Okay. Yes, so go ahead.
All right,
I think I should, by the way, I think I made a motion. So do I have a second for that motion that we adjourn it? For
I
one month?
will second that. We give advisory opinions and informal opinions all the time.
Yep. So there's a motion that we're going to adjourn this for 1 month. Artie, what do you say?
I second that.
And you say yes?
Yes, I'm sorry,
Okay,
yes.
sorry. That Ken,
Yes.
Rosie,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
and Judd. Is Judd there? He may be on mute. Hold on.
I was on mute, sorry, yes.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, terrific. All right, thank you. So go ahead and we'll give you some advice here.
What you see on the screen right now is the existing topography of the property with the
Yep.
existing home and the existing walls.
Okay,
You will see that these walls here are set. They're very rigid, and that if I zoom in, you'll actually notice that they're actually quite tall. This bottom wall is almost 6 feet tall, and this wall here is almost 8 to 10 feet tall.
okay,
That is within the existing. What we're looking at right here is a slope analysis done that was by Hudson Engineering, who's also on this call. What we were running into is, because we have a larger lot and an overall size of the lot, with the flat area here that kind of goes down to the Hudson River, that's amortizing our steep slopes out at a very significant and devalued rate. if the code were to read, which I'm aware that it's not, that you were taking into account just the building envelope or the construction zone rather than the building envelope, you would actually see that we are very much up against the steep slopes. I think the drawing that tells the story the most is right here. This is our proposed front elevation, and you'll see the dotted line in the perimeter with this light shade. This represents the house that's on the site right now. You can see that we're 12 to 15 vertical feet lower than that existing home. If we focus in on this left side elevation right here, this is an existing retaining wall that I pointed out to you on the previous drawing. By removing that and bringing the lot back to more of a natural topography, we're down here at the lowest of the lower point of an 82.6. That gives us the 40-foot height definition that would be granted to us if we did qualify for the steep slopes condition. So that steep slopes, along with returning the grade and the topography across the back of the house more to its more natural, and being 12 to 14 vertical feet less than the house that's there, we're asking the board to consider this hardship. It's working with the natural topography. It's much less of a presence. If you had a chance to read the neighboring support letters, everyone seems very enthusiastic about just getting rid of some of the volume that's there now,
Right.
and having this cascade down. So I think
So this is already submitted. So doesn't that issue become prevalent because you're extending the home closer to where the grade is greatest? I mean, if you had kept the home back where it originally was, you wouldn't have this issue, I would think, correct?
as long as we were working within those same existing walls, which we don't think that we should, have to design around existing retaining walls that are giving us this flat area here. So by removing, you'll see that these walls, if I zoom in, if I may, that these walls return along the side of the property. So by getting rid of this and allowing the topography to come back and be more natural and more flowing and turning our house at more of the angle, that's where we are getting our pinch point here.
Is the entire house now going to be all newly constructed, or are you using some of the existing home?
It's new construction.
Okay.
Construction. Okay. So when you're talking about reducing the existing coverage, is that all retaining wall pretty much, or anything more than that?
The existing coverage,
Yeah.
we're going back to that okay, is this garage, this, like, you're looking at here represents the existing coverage. All of this black slate patios, the stone walls here, the stairs, this garage, all of that is being removed. What we're putting back in, going back to the coverage conversation, is just significantly less coverage than what you see here.
Okay. Okay.
Well, but more coverage in home, right? Less coverage in patios and stairs, but the home itself is going to be more coverage of the home, the building, correct?
Yes,
More square footage.
Yes, if you go from heated, I don't know about if it's more square footage because we're significantly lower. So it's a lower height, lower volume.
Right.
But the overall,
And that would be an FAR conversation anyway, right? This is not an
Right.
FAR conversation.
correct. Right. What you're seeing
Go
here.
back to the chart, and I know we're not supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
we aren't going to do this, but we're doing it a little bit. So just go back to the chart. This way, at least for next month, we know we have a head start, I guess. The chart, we had the numbers, comparisons of existing and proposed.
Dwelling size.
Right.
Right. So the existing dwelling side is 5151 and we're at 4613.
Right. Okay.
So if we are doing this a little bit, I do feel compelled to show you one other drawing, if I may.
Yeah.
Go ahead. It's okay.
Yeah, please.
Open the door.
Go ahead. I did. It was my fault.
The less issues we have next month, the easier this will go.
So the dwelling is smaller than the
Yeah,
the
interesting.
average.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there is a, I'm going to keep it zoomed into the table, but just to show you what this graphic is, these are all of the neighbors. We took pictures of the houses showing you where they are in relation to the neighborhood itself.
Mhm.
And if we just zoom in and we take a look at the square foot and percentages. So our current existing is 4.98%, and we're asking for 3.91%. But if you take a look at what is in this neighborhood, you're going to see 13, 7, 10, 16. So we're nowhere near tipping the scales or asking for, anything that is not fitting into the neighborhood.
Yeah, so the issue, I guess, on height, as I understand it, is basically where you're measuring it from, right? It's so
Right.
because you're going over by where the retaining walls, so it's not particularly it's not any kind of view issue. Not that we necessarily consider, concern ourselves so much with view issues, but it's more that you are placing it on that part of the property, so you're going down.
It's
Exactly.
I think it's a combination of placing it on that portion of the property, but it's also a combination of getting rid of the existing retaining wall. So if you look at
Right.
right, so if we would like to have something that's much more natural, much more gradual. Obviously, I think it's just a better feel for everyone in every view corridor as well. If we wanted to just quote build another wall, we could easily build a 5-foot wall and hit the 35. But I think the point of this process is if we can articulate to the board that it's just a better product and it's a better scenario for the land, for the view.
Is that a terrace or a patio or something at the end on the left side?
This is the patio. Yes, this is a patio off.
It also
off-
brings you close, and that brings you closer to that river view, the river view, which is just spectacular, I guess.
Yeah.
It is truly something.
Okay.
I mean, it's definitely one of the things that makes this area so unique and so, treasured.
Yeah. Anybody have any comments or feelings? I mean, then we're not obviously at this point committing ourselves to anything. It's more at this point advising so that next month, hopefully, whatever issues there are can get resolved by the end of that meeting.
What is, I can't quite read it on, what is the total height, like how much does this exceed allowable in terms of height?
So if we measure all the way to our lowest
Right.
grade, which is the outside of this pillar that's holding
Right.
up this deck, the lowest grade at the house is 82.6. So it's not even at the foot. It's not even at the footprint of, say, the FAR, the heated envelope of the house. It's out at the deck. So at that point, to our highest, we are at the 40 feet. That would be our limit had we been able to prove steep slopes. But again, due to the size of the lot, etc., we weren't able to make that calculation.
Right.
And
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, so how much are you over considering that we're not doing steep slope here?
It would be the 5 feet that you get for
5.
steep slopes.
And if you had the retaining wall in place, as you said, you wouldn't need the height variance.
I mean, we couldn't do that exact retaining wall per se, but we would have to build another 5-foot retaining wall,
Right.
which is honestly just kind of rigid and it's not desired.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, what do people do? Anybody want to express any opinions on that? I mean, this is kind of what it is now, so that if, they're trying to get a read basically on what we would say next month. And is there any information anybody wants for next month, or any inclination not to approve it? I mean, I think that's all information that we could, without binding ourselves, give them so they know what to work with if they have to make any adjustments for next month.
I just have one question, just because it just presents itself. Looking at the highest point of the house, which is, I guess, the third level from the river, you get the terrace top. That's the highest, right? So how much higher is that to the second level, just below that? 2 or 3 feet?
I believe it's 3 feet, and that's only on the uphill side. You wouldn't even see that from the riverside. That portion is here at the front of the house only.
Okay. I got you. Okay.
Is the existing house non-conforming
By-
in terms of height? I understand you're measuring from a different place, but
It's non-conforming in every sense of the word that we've tried. to put.
I'm glad you're taking that house down then. That's a bad house.
That is
Don't
that.
let the
that is-
neighbors hear that. Don't let the neighbors hear that. though.
That is the mutual goal.
Well, I mean, I'm,
This is Judd. I went down to see the property. And when you drive up to the home, the existing roof line, it doesn't, look that high to begin with. But then when you go to the other side of the home, you do see the height there. But this, proposed design lowers the roof line dramatically. And then it also on the side of the river, it provides easier access to that lower lawn that's down there without having to go down a lot of steep steps that are there right now.
yeah, I was gonna say that I'm pretty sympathetic, I think, to the application. I'm pleased that the new construction will be, have a lower roof line, and as to the coverage will be a much lower coverage, and the letters from the neighbors all obviously don't have any problem with it or encouraging, so I'm inclined to grant it.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate the feedback.
Anybody else have any?
Yeah, I'm with Ken. I really wouldn't have any objection to this. I think it is consistent with the whole flavor of the neighborhood. And I think it will look a lot better than the house that's there.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah, my, height variances obviously are always a little tricky, but the fact that this is really in effect lowering the height of the house quite a bit and lowering coverage, make it a pretty sympathetic application. There is always a little bit of a sense of that house looming, I feel like, on that property as you drive down, and this will definitely address that. Anybody else have anything to say on this?
Thank you, sir.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hi, John. How are you?
I've been trying to get in for 15 minutes. I could get into the meeting, but you couldn't hear me. And I even tried to dial in. When you dial in, they say you can listen, but you can't speak. So finally, I got a message that apparently somebody let me into the meeting. I've been listening without participating, but from what I've heard, I'm certainly favorably inclined here.
Okay. All right, great. So I think you've got your feedback, and I just think
I do appreciate that.
and we think this has to be properly noticed. We can, I think, deal with it next month. Doesn't sound like there's a lot of work you guys need to do on your end for that.
So to be clear, do we need to send those mailings out again?
No. 1 month adjournment does not need you to renotice it.
Very good.
All righty. Well, thank you very much. Sorry that there was a hiccup, but I think we got a good sense of what we're dealing with here, and it looks like we're in a good position to deal with it pretty quickly next month.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, the next matter on our agenda is Kimber and Golden. Do we have anybody here appearing for that?
If you're here for this application, please, okay, there we go. We have somebody.
Hi, I'm Laura Wakefield. I'm the architect.
Hi.
Pat Steinschneider. Hi. Pat Steinschneider is logging
Now
on
on,
right
so
now.
now turn off your thing.
Okay.
And start my video. So can you hear me and can you see me?
We can see you and hear you.
Oh, that's scary. Okay, we'll see what happens.
Before we get too far in, have you noticed the neighbors, and you'll get proof of that to the village?
We did all the noticing, all that's done. So we should be in good shape with all of those good things. We submitted all that to the to the building department, to
Okay.
Sarah and the building department.
Super. Okay, so go ahead, Pat.
Okay, let me see if I can get this to work. Okay, share screen. And right here, and then slideshow. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Excellent. That's really good news. I've had some challenges in the last couple of weeks with this thing. Okay, this is the Kimbers residence. It's 9 Sturridge Ridge, which is in the Dearman Park subdivision. Not that you need to pay a lot of attention to this, but this is the list of professionals, non-professionals, and everybody that's involved working on the project. There was some concern expressed by a neighbor that that wasn't the case, but it is. Where I want to start with this is actually the origin of the lot. I will be quick on it, so I won't be wasting a lot of time, but what I've got before you now is Cronin's sheet. Cronin Engineering was the engineer that worked on this subdivision. They were working for a company that was Westwood Associates, which was myself and 2 other people. We had purchased the property, we were subdividing it. And what you've got is the revised drawing, their site plan drawing, that was the one that was used for the approval, the actual approval of the subdivision and the limited site plan for the project. I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit on this. This is another sheet. This is their SP 1.5, which shows greater detail. But as I come in with a cleaner sheet, what I'm showing you here is this is the property here in the corner, lot 5. And it's a piece of property that is so steep that the planning board, in approving this for limited site plan approval, actually included the retaining walls and the regrading of the lot as integral to the creation of this lot. In the same way that the planning board requires there to be a typical house or a concept house with a driveway shown on the property, on this property and several others, 6, 9, 2, and 7, they actually included the retaining wall itself as integral to the site. It's the reason that this is not just a request for a variance, but also a request for interpretation, because the way we interpret this, that was a condition of the lot that the purchaser had to accept when they bought it, that they would have to build this wall, because it not only makes it a buildable lot, it also protects the conservation easement. What we have done in our design is propose the construction of the wall at the exact same height that was approved on the plans, elevation 375. This drawing has, you can't really read it here, but it gives you a proposed first floor. All of the lots had a proposed first floor on them. And the proposed first floor on this house was at 391. The house we've designed is at 387.17. We're actually lower, we've dropped the house down. We've worked hard from the beginning to get it down and make it as compact as we were able to get it.
Patty, let me just ask you before you go any further. So my understanding is your work isn't done with the planning board, correct?
Our work is not done at the planning board. They got to the point where most of the questions have been answered, so they felt that that was the right time to send us to the ZBA, because obviously the ZBA has a major say in how this works. We either need the interpretation or we need the variance to be able to build the house that the planning board has reviewed.
Yeah, because they sent us a note basically saying they're not taking a position, yes or no, on this, which is something, I don't know, in my 10 or plus years on the board, I've never really seen. So
Yeah.
it's
I think
a position for us to be in.
Yeah, the reason for that is that there were 3 members of the planning board there at the time, and one of them was not sure he was comfortable with recommending it. He said he didn't have an objection to it, but he didn't feel comfortable recommending it. The chair said, then what we'll do is we'll send this to them without recommendation. And he kind of, he's a fun guy. He and I have known each other a long time. He goes, don't worry, we're not going to say we're against it either. We're just sending it to them, let them make the decision on what they think is most appropriate. I think if we can go through it, we can show you how what we're proposing is appropriate and justified. And it starts with the fact that from the very beginning, there was the anticipation that this wall had to be built. The retaining wall, actually, the reason I'm using the date on this that was approved is because that was the one that still included this retaining wall. It already included this retaining wall. The plan that was actually finally filed for this subdivision not only had that retaining wall on 5 and 6, it also had that retaining wall coming all the way down and joining with 2. That wall was actually built at the same, right after the road was cut. The road was cut through significant amounts of rock. At one point, there were piles of rock all over the place. That rock was used to build the retaining wall from lot 2 across lot 3, lot 4, up to where it stopped. It did not continue on lots 5 and 6. Other retaining walls were built in other places throughout the development, but at that time, 5 and 6 were already spoken for, and the future owners of those 2 lots did not at that point, it just didn't work out that the wall was built at that same time for them. So what it really should have been, in my opinion, that wall should have come right around, and this whole thing would have, not been an issue. The houses that were built on 2, 3, 4, and 6 all had similar site issues, but 2, 3, and 4 were starting with the wall having already been built, and we'll be able to show you that as we go through. Lot 6 was actually developed more recently, and that does have a retaining wall that's built behind it, and that's, if that retaining wall hadn't been built, if that site hadn't been regraded out in advance of the construction of the house, then they would have needed a variance as well. The only difference here really is we have not yet built the retaining wall. And I think at this point, we need the approvals from the planning board to build the retaining wall. So it's all, it's a package of building the house with the retaining wall being built first. But if the interpretation is that this retaining wall is part of the site, then we're compliant with the 40 feet. We're almost compliant with the 35 feet. I think we're at 35.88 feet, where 35 feet is permitted. So, that either is a small variance or we get told to tighten it up and get rid of the need for the variance. But that would necessitate the interpretation that this lot was approved with this retaining wall and this regrading, and that should be taken into consideration as the base. Can I take you through the other stuff?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is just showing that a little bit more clearly. Actually, here you can read that 391 first floor. One of the other things I just want to point out here, because it's one of the things that made this development a little bit more challenging. What we've done here is taken that plan and we've superimposed the proposed plan on top of it. What we're showing this is that the original house that was shown, not house, but diagram that was shown, is roughly where we're building it, although we're a little bit further to the north than that was. But here you see this red line and this green line. The green line was the line that was on the site plan that was approved in March of 2002. By the time the plat map was filed, adjustments had been made, and the 12/2002 file plat map, the property line is actually this red line. So what that did is that necessitated the zoning setback shifting, and the 2-story house that was proposed would be located, as you see here. This is what we're proposing, and this is how they relate to one another. So I think we're building where the house is supposed to be built in everyone's, all the planning board's thoughts. This is just the survey that was done, and the only reason I'm including that is that it was the basis for this drawing, which was done by Hudson Engineering. This is the drawing that shows that this is all steep slopes. This is not a lot that has like a nice flat area where we could build, but then we're trying to build where it's steep slope, and that's causing a problem with height. This site drops off. It used to drop off continuously from this side of the cul-de-sac. When this cul-de-sac was built, half of it was cut into the rock, The other half out to this line was all filled. There's actually a regrading easement that's on this property that was there for the construction of the road. So once you get off the road, this drops down very, very fast. In fact, it drops 28 feet in 100 feet, which is, that's a steep slope site. One of the concerns that came up was if we build that retaining wall and we now have regraded the site, are we still allowed to use the 40-foot provision in the code, or have we leveled the site out so it's less than 15%? And what this diagram shows is that the slope of the site, even after the construction of the retaining wall and the regrading, is still ranging from 15.6 up to 17.7%. So we're still entitled to that 40-foot height. Here's the set of drawings that we actually submitted to the planning board. Here's the site plan. Just to quickly, so you understand it, that retaining wall is back here. Oops, I shouldn't have clicked. What we've done here is we've pulled the house as tight as we can to the south and to the east. The neighbor's house is positioned here. He's got windows on both sides of this chimney. He's looking out this way at really great views of the river. He's got a wonderful backyard, and none of the house is projecting back to where we'd be allowed to build it here. That would not help us, by the way, in our height. No matter where we build in here, we've got the same site condition with the height. We have been relatively compact with the driveway. We've got the garage tucked in. And I think, we've tried to be compact. This corner here, that's the setback line. This line here is the setback line. So again, we've wedged this into, it looks like there's a lot of room in the southeast corner, but we're actually tight fit in there. I don't think we need this. This is just floor area. This is the zoning table showing that we're compliant with everything else, with the exception of the height. We're at 40.5 feet, where 35 feet is permitted to the average existing grade. And we're at 49.3, where 40 feet is permitted from the lowest point of existing grade to the highest ridge. So those are the two variances that we're seeking if the interpretation doesn't solve the problem. Just floor plans, it's a 3-bedroom house. It's a small house relative to its neighbors, but it's a relatively, it's a challenging house to build because of the site. Here's the front elevation of the house. This dash line that you're seeing here, that's actually where the grade is right now. So to get to our first floor, we're up 8 feet from the existing grade. And that's with us coming down from this cul-de-sac at the steepest slope we can do. It's, in a driveway, and be able to have a flat pull into the garage. Just something really quickly, we also did the houses on 2, 3, 5, and 7 Stearns. And we did this concept on all of them to try and get the fronts of the house facing the streets, not feel tall. We actually have the eave for the second floor at the midpoint of the windows on the second floor. So that's enabled us to keep this ridge height very tight without looking like we have a flattish roof. The existing roof pitch here is 9 and 12. The front is 12 and 12, but the height from the attic to the ridge is 4.5 feet. So, this is not one of those things where you walk up and there's a big attic above. There's no space to that. Here's some sections, but we took this section, kind of blew it up. So again, you can see how this topography just drops down really quickly. One of the comments at one point was that why are we going to blast all this rock out to build a basement, walkout basement? The reality is we're stretching down into the ground to find something to sit on. Our first floor is 8 feet above the grade at the front. Our basement floor is 6 feet above the grade at the back. So the idea here is to build the retaining wall, a 6.5 foot high retaining wall, and raise that up to that 375, which changes the lowest point of existing grade from 367, the existing, to then being 376.33. And
Can
it's,
I stop you for a second?
Sure.
I'm just taking the minutes, and I wrote down that you said that the attic was 4.5 feet, and I'm looking here and I'm seeing 6.75.
6.75, the collar tie that comes across here, there's a collar tie under the ridge, and
Okay.
that's at 4.5 feet.
So, okay, but the total height is not 4.5 feet, it's 6.75.
Right, and that's to the bottom of the ridge, to the top of the rafter, the ceiling joists.
Okay,
Still not you couldn't turn it into your kid's bedroom if you liked your kid. Okay, so the other thing I want to point out is that from the cul-de-sac to the ridge, we're at 26.55 feet. So that's a relatively, from the street side, we're dropped down pretty good. We're down, and then we follow that with our eaves getting down, making the whole thing feel like it's stepping down. So it's intended to feel like it's not a big house. We don't really need to go through this, but this is how the average grade was calculated, which is where we came out with what's now 41.69 feet to the existing average grade. We become 35.88 to the average grade after the retaining wall is built. This, again, I don't think we need to go through, but it's to demonstrate that we do not have a third story. One of the concerns that people had earlier was, well, does this make this a 3-story house? So we've done all the calculations and we've concluded that the Village of Irvington standards do not have this be a 3-story, nor do the New York State standards. Their way of calculating it is a little different, but in neither case is this a 3-story house. It's compliant in terms of number of stories. I think this is what is perhaps going to be the most helpful of things that we're showing. What we've done here is these 4 on the top. This one here is the proposed house. This is all correct in terms of the height relative to each house. So what you're able to do is see that the neighboring house at 7 Stearns has a ridge at 417. The neighboring house at 11 Stearns has a ridge of 419.35. And we're proposing a ridge of 416.3. One of the things that was discussed early on was having a house that hit the average between the 2 houses adjoining. We are actually lower. Our roof is lower than both of those. Our first floor is also lower than both of theirs. We've gotten the house down in an effort to make it as as small as we could, so that we're looking for the minimum on what the consideration from this board would be. The 4 elevations down here are the backs of the houses. The subject house is here on the end, and what we're showing here, well, we've limited our wall to 6.5 feet. The other walls were built before the village adopted that limit on height, and they're actually taller, but at the same time, our basement floor is consistent with the other basement floors. Again, our ridge is, obviously the same. So the idea that we show 3 stories towards the west, towards the high school, is the same condition that is on the other 3 houses that we did along that same street. These are the 4 houses that are on Stearns Ridge along that side of the street. 11 is kind of at the end of the cul-de-sac. It's a little different. And then the original design we did of this project, we only did single loaded streets using it was actually the way we made the topography work. So there's no houses across the street from us where these houses are. The houses that are above are actually on Dearman Close, which is the other street that we created. This just shows that in a little bit more detail, but unless you've got questions about it, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I guess one other, here, while I'm doing this, look at this. One of the things that I want to point out is the portion of the house that's closest to 11 Stearns is actually a 1-story structure. It's the garage and the family entry and a little office space. So in deference to the concerns that were expressed by the neighbor at 11 Stearns, from the beginning, what we did is put the mass over towards the south end and kept what is on the north side of the house, the one-story portion. Also starting with the idea that the first floor at 11 Stearns is more than 5 feet above the first floor here. So, you know, when you're really looking out, this is fairly, you know, this is not, I'll use the word looming because that's been used. I don't think that's accurate. Here's a.
Patty, this is already cemented. Patty, just give you a break. Maybe you want to catch your breath for a second. The question is, I know there was one letter that was objecting and you wrote something in opposition to that, right?
Yes.
Could you summarize that objection and how you reacted to it?
Well, it's a little hard for me, and I'm not trying to be cute saying I was confused by what the concern is, but the complaint, and I'm sure that the author of the letter will be speaking on this tonight. He complained about two things, as I understood it. One is that this house is very large and overscaled and looming over his house and too bulky, too big. He also was concerned with the precedent that we were setting by getting a variance to be permitted to have a house that would be this tall, if you will. And again, the tall in this case is how deep it goes down. It's not how high up it goes. We are the shortest house in this part of the, you know, we're the shortest on the street. But actually compared directly to this, our ridge is lower than our two neighboring homes. So it's hard for me to imagine how we're looming over 11 Stearns with a one-story house that's dropped down significantly lower than his. But I have some.
Patsy,
yeah.
Let me ask you this question. I'm sorry, are you finished on that topic? If you just continue.
Go ahead.
So what has the planning board done? Have they approved this, the way the house will be situated on this lot, or is that still up in the air?
I think they are at the point where if the zoning board were so inclined to approve this, I think my hope is that we would be approved at the next meeting.
You say approved, but they haven't approved the house situated as you're depicting it here yet. They've not been approved. That's not been approved.
They have not granted an approval of this design because they really can't until a variance would be granted.
Now, why is that? I don't understand. Yeah, because of the height. So
because of the height, we don't need. There's no other variances being. We're dramatically smaller. Actually, if I can go to this sheet,
why couldn't they say we approve the house as depicted? This is how it's locked in at this point, subject to an approval by the ZBA. I mean, how can we prove something that's not yet been fixed on the lot?
I have the same question for what it's worth. I don't get it.
Yeah,
I also don't understand why this was sent to us when with a letter from the zoning board, from the planning board saying we don't approve and we don't not approve. I just don't understand what we're supposed to do with this.
As I said, I think it was because one of the members was concerned about what he was really.
Yeah, but
and there were only 3 members there. So it's you know, I'm stopping myself 4 or 5 times in this last second from saying what I think the other members who were not there thought, but you know, that's for them to say, not me. But in terms, we've worked hard with the planning board and with the village's consulting engineer to get all of the other issues resolved. There are no other issues that they're wondering about at this point in terms of placement of the house on the lot. There's, you know, as I showed earlier, it's not as though we've got this house in one part of the lot. If we move to another lot, another part of the site, we would be alleviating the height. It gets worse if we shift the house. So we're.
As a question, if the house moves to a higher elevation, does that help? And was that been proposed to the planning board?
There really is no higher elevation that we can get to on the lot.
Closer to the cul-de-sac.
Here, I'll go back to where that was so you can see it.
Maybe, yeah, the elevation line.
Yeah, if we slid this up this way,
yeah,
it would probably mean that we'd have to put the garage here, which would mean that we're coming into the garage off the street, and the house would then be probably built maybe going out this way. As I said, we could build to this line. From everything that we started with on this, which was to not be building in front of the neighbor's house, that would be contrary to that. It also, the reality is that we would end up at the exact same, the height of the existing grade would be the same. So we wouldn't be reducing the variance that was needed. We would just end up with a house that would not be, we've been careful in the way we've handled the garages on all the other houses to not dominate the appearance of the house from the street. So,
Can I offer a suggestion?
Sure.
I don't think, and this is of course subject to the chairperson's determination and emotion, but I don't think we should vote on any variance where the house is still slipping and sliding up and down the lot possibly. I do think that, and Patty, I think you asked for at the beginning, possibly an interpretation, much like we talked about at the last
Matter.
application, thanks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, informally, as situated as it is, I have no problem with it, quite frankly. Again, I don't think we should vote on it. At this point, I think you need to get the planning board to approve it, but if you're looking for some indication, or if they're looking for some indication of how we feel about it, I think, as you've shown, the roof line is not above the others. You've tried to preserve the site with a view shed for one of the neighbors on the other side of the street. The back is no different than the rest of the other three properties that you've shown in that line. The wall is the wall. I mean, you had to comply with what the current statute is. So I'm not troubled by what you're depicting here. I just don't think we should be voting on something until it's approved, the location is approved by the planning board. That's my humble opinion.
and I'm not going to argue with anybody who's got the ability to vote. I will offer one thing, which is that if you acted on the interpretation, you could obviate the need for there being a variance.
Well, tell us more. What do you mean by that?
The original limited site plan that was prepared for this lot shows a retaining wall of a certain height and a regrading of the lot coming up from the retaining wall. If the interpretation of this board were to be that that is a, if you will, pre-existing condition that's an obligation, and that's what we would need to comply with, similar to the way the other houses have done the same, then what we would design for that height, and we wouldn't then need to come back and get a variance.
Well, I guess
Let me ask you one thing, Patty, but you would need a variance because you're like a little over, right?
If I were the chair of the zoning board and I had Patty Steinschneider coming before me and he was telling me that he needs a variance to get 35.88 feet where he's permitted 35, I'd tell Patty Steinschneider to sharpen his pencils and give me a,
Okay.
But that's just what I would do.
I hear you. Let's just hear, I would like to know if there's a neighbor or somebody who wants to be heard on this.
Can I just ask one question first?
Yeah, please.
I mean, just in terms of the height, so there's a much smaller issue involved if the retaining wall is there. What's to prevent you from building the retaining wall and then coming back to us? Is it just that the work is all wrapped up together?
You kick me to the door? No, I think, the reality here is we're with the retaining wall, we're at the max. So it's not like, it's not something that the retaining wall gives us a whole bunch of freedom and now we say, oh, wow, now we can go up, instead of being 416, we'll build at 420. If we're 416.3, we're a couple of inches, about an inch really, below the maximum. So we're the retaining, we've actually designed it. We were aware of this retaining wall. We were aware of this regrading. We designed the house in the same way we designed the other houses on the street, with the exception of Levenstern's, so that it would be compliant with that regraded site. But it would not, we would not be able to add 4 inches to the height of the house and still be compliant. And as I've already said, to get compliant on the 35-foot rule, I need to cut 0.88 feet out of the house. So there's no risk that we're coming back. And as I said, if we came in and asked for, at that point, I think the comment that we heard from one of the members who I do think supports this, but he had to get there to do it. His big problem was thinking, why would you need a variance to build a new house? Why don't you just design what the code permits? The thing we're trying to do, in addition to have it all make sense for the site and for the owner's needs and interests is there's also a feeling that the neighborhood has about this. There are a lot of neighbors interested, and the concern that we heard from a number of different neighbors was they were hoping that we weren't going to build, and it was, they must have talked before because they all said the same thing. They were hoping we weren't going to build a house that looked like it was down in a hole. And the idea was, can we build a house that carries the line of the other homes and ends the street really nicely? And I think we've accomplished that. But if I get back to that sheet that I keep trying to point things out, this comparison, I just want a couple of really important things here. First, the lot we're talking about is the largest lot on the street. And the house we're proposing is the smallest house on the street. So when people talk of houses that are too bulky, too massive and all that, we're much smaller than the other houses that are on that street on the largest lot. And we're not talking largest by a few feet. We're 15,000 square feet bigger than 3 of the houses. So it's something that I think we've designed a modest house. Here's something else that I think really matters in terms of the concerns that have been expressed by looming and overbearing or whatever it was. Our house, our second floor is 41 feet wide. That compares the next house up is 59 feet. That's 18 feet longer. And we get to the point of 80 feet wide on the second floor. So when you're going along this street, we are the smallest of the houses on this street. We're shorter than both our neighbors. Our first floor is tucked down lower than our neighbors. So we've made a lot of effort to keep this down and not have it be a house that seems like it's too big.
But Patty, I think your frontage on the street though is smaller than any others, isn't it?
Sure. Frontage on the street is just big enough basically for the driveway.
Yeah. So it's not, it's not surprising that this is smaller than the other houses.
Well, if we did our building envelope is bigger than the others. So if we were being a little bit more cavalier about it, we could run this house north-south and easily have a 70, 80 foot wide house. That would not be a difficulty. It wouldn't be the house that the owners want. It wouldn't be the house that we would want to design. I think we've captured a cool way of tying the whole neighborhood together. I mean, our rotation relates to Barb Benaya's house next door with the rotation that we have in his house. So it kind of really, it's contextually responsive to the other houses on the street. I think we've done a good job, but that's because other people work on it, not me. Laura Wakefield, by the way, is sitting here in my office and listening. She is the architect on this.
So let me ask: is there any neighbors or anybody from the community who wants to be heard on this?
Yes, there are several people raising their hands in the chat, so I can allow them to speak one at a time. The first person that raised their hand is Amy Ziff, so I'm going to allow her to talk first.
Okay, terrific.
Hi there. Thank you all for your time. I know I've only recently been listening in on these meetings as it pertains to our neighborhood. I live at 5 Stearns Ridge, and one of those houses on the lines Patty just showed you. I was probably one of the very first houses other than Bard, my neighbor, who was here for many, many years prior, but one of the first homes occupied up here. And, this house at the end of this cul-de-sac is my street, and it's been sort of 6 years in the making. We've been waiting for the right buyer on this property. It is a tricky property. And, for all the reasons that you're sort of hearing and why Patty had to design something just the way that he has done it. And I can't speak in favor enough. I did hear at the planning board, and I wanted to just, state this, that they are looking for the approval from you guys. I don't know why it sort of feels like there's this, someone has to say yes. I guess, and approve it with the variance. And we're hoping that you will tonight, because honestly, as I said, it's been 6 years in the waiting. We're so excited about the Kimbers coming to Irvington, and we want to see the ground broken and get this lot in and completed, and, you know, have families on our street paying the taxes in Irvington and enjoying all of the amazing things that we all get to enjoy living here and being part of the community. So I hope that you will give them the approval needed. Thank you.
Sarah, you're on mute.
Sorry, my dog was barking. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to be heard on this?
Yes, there's one other person, Alan Gurkovich. I'm going to allow him to talk now.
Okay, can the board hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate your time. Did you also receive the letter that I'd sent out through Sarah, I believe earlier this week?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, it is a tricky lot, and we certainly want to see the Kimbers here, and I appreciate everyone's effort. And frankly, it really has been about a 4 to 5 month effort. We've been to 3 planning board meetings, and I think I would urge you to look at those planning board conversations and zoom into those specific talks about this house, because the board was very clear on each one of the 3 planning board meetings that they will not allow a 13-foot variance. That even if you wanted to consider the 35 feet plus the 5, and that gives you 40, they have zero justification for the 49 afterwards. So take a look at it. Perhaps I misunderstood what the board was saying 3 times. The house is wedged in. It is looming. It is tall. Now, it is a very unique lot, and everyone keeps on saying it's a very big lot. Most of it is a conservation easement, and Patty knows that very well. So from my point of view, I trust what you are going to do, but I would urge you to take a look at what the planning board said, because the planning board didn't say, just come over to the zoning board. The planning board said, we do not approve this. We cannot approve this height. That's not the holistic approach to this area. And what's being done here is every angle is being utilized for the specific use and perspective that Patty wants to show. That's not the intent of this at all. It's a unique lot. I certainly understand that, but there is a conforming house that can be built, and I have yet to see that. And I think the 3 requests from the planning board have not been adhered to. Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Any comments from any board members?
Well, I'm sorry. The homeowner is raising her hand to speak.
Hi, this is Megan Kimber. We are the current owners of the lot at 9 Stearns Ridge, and thank you so much for your time. We have been through, as everyone has kind of reiterated, a number of planning board meetings, and I think the consensus from the board, as we have understood it, was that they do not feel like they could make a call. Yes, it's an 8.3 foot variance that we're requesting, and they said that in their minds, while that is a higher variance, they also don't know if the interpretation of adding the retaining wall and thus not needing a variance or needing a variance of less than a foot was a call that they felt comfortable making, since that could fall to you at the zoning board. So that's kind of why we're here this month, and we're really hoping that you would be able to make the call on whether this can be an interpretation. Obviously, with the approval of the limited site plan that was approved many, many years before we purchased this lot, we were anticipating that once that's in place, we would be building a home that, as you can see from the drawings, fits in very consistently with all of the neighbors. The height is, yes, based on the existing grade now, but with the site work that our surrounding neighbors have all completed, it would be a very similar situation where the house appears no taller from the front, the back, or the sides. And so ideally, we would look for that interpretation this evening. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
There's no one raising their hand, but there are several comments in the chat.
Yes, I saw the comments in the chat, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
But as somebody else wants to be heard on this?
Yes, there's one more.
Hi, this is Lori Davidowitz, 3 Stearns Ridge. I also live on the cul-de-sac, and I just want to chime in terms of the planning board meeting. I do believe, and I did go through this process with my husband and went to many planning board meetings and even one zoning board meeting for our own home. I do believe that they felt the next step was for the zoning board to make a decision. And as a homeowner who's gone through this process, I am very sympathetic to the Kimbers being kicked back to the planning board with no clear direction from the zoning board, that they'll lose yet another month of making any progress. So I hope that you can help them move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else or with comments?
Nobody else is raising their hand.
Terrific. And what about board members? Anybody have anything they want to add at this moment?
Well, I agree with Artie. It seems to me we're hearing 2 different versions of the planning board, and I don't understand why they don't approve what they can approve. And if there's a variance, we will deal with the variance.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, Sarah, I mean, I'm not quite sure I understand what we're being asked to do. It seems to me, on the one hand, there is a variance potentially, or on the other hand, we're determining the point from which we would be measuring whether or not there's a variance.
Right.
So I don't know what we're voting on, to be honest.
Right. Right. Well, I guess we're not voting on anything until somebody makes a motion.
Right, exactly. But the planning board hasn't told us what they want us to vote on.
Yeah, they haven't. You're absolutely right. So I guess the way that I'm looking at this, and I'm very open to any input from any board member, is I'm not going to go ahead and make a motion about a variance tonight, because we should not be giving variances until the planning board has told us that they approve what's on the site and they need to accept that they need a variance. And then that's where we jump in. I don't think we should be coming into a process that isn't finished. That being said, I'm not opposed to the idea of giving guidance on what the law says in terms of where you measure from, because that's something that is just going to get kicked back to us anyway. And that's something that I think is just giving guidance to the planning board. It's not approving any sort of variance. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm curious,
Well,
Sarah,
I
is
can-
it for us to provide that opinion, or is this something that the village attorney should be providing the opinion on? I mean, personally, I'd have to dig into it a little bit more to really understand the starting point for the measurement. I mean,
Right, I mean, I
maybe
guess-
my colleagues here have dealt with this more than me and could give more.
My concern is we should not approve a wall by itself, but we should approve the wall and what's being built on it as it's presented to us and as approved in an approved site plan by the planning board.
Right, but my understanding is the wall is there. Is that right, Patty?
The wall has not yet been built.
The wall is not yet been built.
Right, but the wall is on the limited site plan, and it's the only wall that was shown on the limited site plan that has not been built. All the other walls were built and they were used, the grade was then the grade. What we're looking, in a friendly way, because I would never say that I am trying to fight with Mr. Ed Marin. What we're really doing is asking for the interpretation of where should we be measuring from. The height that was on, that's at this site now, or the height that will be there once the required, and I do think it's required, retaining wall is built, and we have the new lowest point of grade at the base of the house.
Okay, so who's requiring the wall?
I think if we didn't want to build the wall, I think we would need to make a presentation to the planning board of why the previously approved by the planning board site plan for this lot should not be followed.
So this piece of property was bought subject to a site plan
Correct.
that had been approved by the planning board
Correct.
that required this retaining wall.
Not only the retaining wall, but the regrading of the lot within the building envelope. Same as on the other lots.
And so what the planning board doesn't understand is, are you measuring from that retaining wall because you bought the property subject to that retaining wall and that regrading being done? Or are you measuring from a different point?
Right. Are you measuring from the existing lowest point of grade at the far out edge of the deck where it happens to be 367, resulting in a 49.3 foot house? You know, it's the code in Irvington. It's a good code if your goal is to restrict people's heights, which it's done well on.
So if you went to the planning board and said, all right, we're going to build this house, we're not putting in the retaining wall, we're just going to build from there, your point is you wouldn't be able to do that because the site plan that was approved for this property before it was purchased had that retaining wall as a requirement.
Right. These drawings that I'm showing you, these are the approved limited site plan drawings. This is what was approved by the planning board. They basically, in the same way that we have to respect the roads and we have to respect the building envelopes that were determined by the planning board at that time, the planning board stipulated, this is a project that took from 1994 until 2002 to get approved, and we really didn't have opposition. It was a very complicated site and everything was meticulously worked out. And what the planning board, they would not have let us put these retaining walls on these drawings if it was something that we had said, this is what we want. What they did is they said, we're going to require that certain walls be done so that the grading mitigates two things in the case of these lots along the ridge. First of all, that you've got a reasonable area to build a house. But second of all, those retaining walls protect the conservation easement. One of the reasons that the December 2002 plan added the retaining wall coming from lot 5 down to the retaining wall on lot 2 was they had come to the conclusion that trying to keep the yards and the backs of the houses from over time kind of morphing into the conservation easement is you provide a real specific barrier. So the retaining wall was built on lots 2, 3, and 4 to protect the conservation easement and to create the buildable lots that were here, the same way that lot 5 is. The only thing was because of negotiations really between parties who aren't even involved in this anymore, that wall was not continued and built on lot 5. It really should have been. At which point we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right. So I guess what I need to know is, what is the planning board looking for from us? Are they looking for an advisory opinion? I mean, I would imagine that the village attorney has had the opportunity to give her opinion on this if Ed thought that was necessary. I just don't know what is being sought from us other than just a variance, which I don't think we're in the position to give because the plan isn't finished, frankly.
Well, I think the plan is finished, but the planning board did not give you that. It did not give you the statement in writing that you needed, which I agree and I understand.
Right.
I can tell you that there's nothing that they have asked us to do in changes to or consideration for the house. There's no, can you shift it this way? Can you tweak it that way? Can you change landscaping? Right. We're down to where the Hahn engineering comments are basically everything's fine once you get your variance. That's literally what their comment is, that this house, basically this house needs the variance for height.
Okay. Right.
And Patty, if the wall was there, you don't need it. Is that what you're saying?
If the wall is there,
right,
I would not have the audacity to come back before you and ask for a 35.88 height instead of just changing the roof a little bit to get it to comply. We would then comply 100%.
So again, the wall was part of the approved site plan. It's not built yet. So if it has to be built as part of the approved process, it gets built, and then it's going to be measured from that wall, or
Measured from where the base of grade then is on the site, which we've calculated to be 376.33. You know, the house.
Again, I'm most concerned about the fact that we don't have an approved site plan pending an approval of our variance on this height issue. I mean, we don't know where, again, not that you're gonna move, you don't have too much place to move around the house anyway, but we don't know where the house is gonna be situated. It's not fixed in a location. I don't understand why the planning board did not approve it, saying this is now subject to the zoning board approval of the height issue, which we do all the time. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Missing a piece there.
Other than the fact that there were only 3 members there that night and one of them was not comfortable, I'm not sure I understand either. But I learned a long time ago, in the same way I would never fight with the zoning board, I've never wanted to pick a fight with the planning board. So
I had a question, Patty, just for
Yeah.
clarification. So if the retaining wall was built and the elevation was regraded,
yep.
what would the height of the home be, the max height at that point?
The height of the house would be just under 35 feet measured from the average grade plane, and the overall height would be just under 40 feet.
Okay.
So it would be just compliant.
Okay.
I mean, you can also, it's easy to see on this that there, you know, the top of the wall is at 375 and the grade on the site is at 376. So the numbers are the numbers that we've worked with for the house so that we would be compliant.
Is anyone saying that the general location and description and the elevations as you've shown is out of character with the neighborhood? Is anyone saying that?
I think Alan is saying that. I mean, I wouldn't want to speak for Alan either, but he's, you know, he has been very adamant in feeling that this house is much taller and bulkier than it should be, and it should be built compliant. I do not agree with him that there would be a way of building compliant here, just from the standpoint, as you can see from the contour lines, that any direction we move, we're going steeper. And unless we're going to build the house down the hill, as I think you probably got some letters from some of the other neighbors that were favorable because they were sent to me from Sarah. Everyone seems to have this same refrain that they don't want the house built down in a hole. They want the end of the cul-de-sac to feel like it is a balanced line of homes along a ridge. Not that all of a sudden the house got shoved down the hill.
Yeah.
Everyone except Alan.
Right.
Right. We understand that.
So Sarah sent us 3 copies of 3 letters that Alan has written to the planning board about this, and the letter that he sent to us.
Yep.
So Patty, if the wall has some bias for being approved already, and if step 1 was to go to the planning board for the approval of just the wall design, the slope, and if Hudson Engineering did that as stage 1, and then if that was all done, and then the land was then resurveyed, it would look a lot different.
Right. In fact, I don't even know that we'd have to go to the planning board for the construction of that wall because they already approved that wall. That this has limited site plan approval with that wall. So I think, a building, but I can also totally understand the Kimbers wanting to have a package that they're doing with a contractor who's accepting responsibility for this as coming in, starting, and finishing. I know that one of the consternation, one of the comments that I get from some of the neighbors is the desire to get the construction done up here. The Ziffs, the Vidowitzes, Barb Benaeus, most definite. I mean, he was the first house we built up there. I don't think Bard believed that he was going to be living in a house for, God, I don't even know, I guess 15 years now with empty building lots surrounding him still. It's been, the years of 2008 to 2012 kind of were in there where things got more challenging. So I think the feeling that everybody has right now is they'd like to see the subdivision completed. And I think, as Amy said, and as Lori has said, and as other people in the subdivision have said, the idea here is for this house to really complete the design of this street. And as I already noted, we did the houses on 2, 3, 4. Oyos did the one on lot 1. And now this is the last lot on that street, which is another reason I don't understand the concern with precedent. It's not as though if this lot is understood as having that retaining wall and all that gets resolved, that somebody somewhere else is going to come in and say, I want that too.
Yeah, precedent goes to sort of everywhere in town. So
right.
Look, I have to tell you, seeing these plans, seeing what you've shown me, I don't have any particular problem with this. I understand that there's been some contention with the neighbor. It doesn't seem to be looming. I just don't know procedurally how we proceed here when we haven't been given a final plan. Giving a variance, I just don't see how we do it. I mean, we could give you, I think, an advisory opinion on what we would do here. I don't know if that would satisfy the planning board, but it's just, I'm struggling. I'm letting this go on probably longer than I should because I'm very sensitive to holding you up another month. I know we don't like doing it. I like to really take care of things the night of, but I don't know, help me out. You have an opinion here on what procedurally we could do?
Well, go ahead.
I mean, I would think that we should write a letter to the planning board and say, please just vote on an approved site plan and send it to us for review. If there's any variances required, force them to do it.
So stupid. Yeah, I mean, it feels, I hate to do that, but I mean, procedurally, we don't really have anything to act on before us. I don't know why this was sent to us at such a premature stage. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't feel premature to anybody who's dealing with it.
That's for
because
sure.
I'm very sensitive to the fact that this has been going on for a while.
Yeah. I can tell you that my 40 years of appearing before you, we have often been in exactly, not quite exactly, because usually it's with a letter that's a little bit more supportive, but we are often at a point where the planning board has pretty well done everything it needs to do, which is the case now. And they then send us to the zoning board before they've granted any approval. And we get the approval from the zoning board, we go back to the planning board, and that's when they adopt a resolution. That's their standard operating procedure.
I've been on the board for a long time, Patty. I know we send you back all the time and say, no, come back with a real plan. I mean, we don't give variances when there's not an actual.
Agreed. But often there isn't, the resolution is following. In fact, it's hard for me to remember a zoning board in Irvington, or a planning board in Irvington when I wasn't there. The standard is somebody getting to a point in the process, being sent to the zoning board, getting the decision from the zoning board, and then going back to the planning board for the resolution. And that's where I think we are with this one. It'd be great if a member of the planning board was here and he could confirm it.
And I think you have a good indication of where this board stands in this application also.
Yeah, I mean, the application, at least I can speak for myself. I won't speak for anybody else, and anybody on the board who wants to say anything, please speak up. The application doesn't look problematic to me. The only thing that's problematic is we haven't been given a full site plan and been told this is the variance we need because it's X amount of feet over, they have to come to us with something to approve. And I don't know what we're supposed to do here.
And I'm also concerned about Patty's other request that we consider giving interpretation on the wall, because that may have implications far beyond this lot. And I'd rather us make a decision confined to this very unique lot. when we
Yeah.
make the decision.
Exactly. Exactly. Does anybody else on the board have anything to say
Yeah.
on this?
Well, I would just say, I mean, the interpretation that Patty is advocating for measuring the height does seem reasonable to me.
Me too.
But I'm just not sure why it hasn't been accepted as an interpretation by Ed Marin or by the village council. And I but for wanting to waste anyone's time, I'd love to know why they don't, give it that interpretation.
Maybe you could suggest that they do that. That could be what you do tonight. The unanimous decision by the zoning board that Ed should interpret it right. That'd be good.
I think the homeowner would like to be heard on this one more time, so please go ahead.
Megan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So similar to the conversation you're having, I think what we would appreciate, just because we are a bit concerned about coming back and forth.
Sure.
Is there any way that you could, when you send whatever back to the planning board, say that as a board, you understand the interpretation and whether it is left up to the building inspector, but as the zoning board, you are comfortable with the interpretation of the retaining wall?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean,
So Sarah, I would not be comfortable with that.
okay. I mean, I'm comfortable with the interpretation. I don't know that I'm comfortable saying that to the zoning board.
Yeah, I'd like,
Right.
I think that's beyond our purview, right? I mean, I think it's really, we should be kicking this back to the planning board, right? And not substituting for them.
I feel the same way for what it's worth.
Yeah.
And I do as well. And when it comes back, we can come back and say that, the zoning, that based on that wall, there's only a variance required of less than 4 inches, as Patty says, or there's a variance of 6 feet or whatever the heck it is. But we can see what we're talking about and grant it as it appears. And we can talk about specific characters and characteristics of the lot. And that's why we're approving it.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the interpretation, that the planning board, if the planning board came to me and said, we're measuring it from here, that would not trouble me. It's just, we need something to say yes or no to, and they just haven't, in my opinion, given us anything that we can really say yes or no to. They have to come back with a plan. But like I say, the plan itself just doesn't seem to present any real challenges for me, at least. Again, everybody else can weigh in on this if they want to, but I just don't feel like we have anything we can go forward with tonight. I think the planning board's got to give us a real plan.
Just so that my clients can get a better night's sleep, is there anybody on the zoning board who feels that the request is not acceptable? If the planning board were to send it to them, would they be inclined to vote against it?
I'm
Yeah.
not,
And I'll just say to everybody on the board, this is just in the form of an advisory opinion. It doesn't
Exactly.
mean that you can vote any other way at another future meeting, but just so that we can kind of sharpen this focus up and get this done as quickly as possible. Is there anybody who feels like a change needs to be made?
I do not.
I do not either. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I had to take a call. My brother had a stroke last week and he's fine, but he was calling me. So I missed some of this. So I'm not prepared to say yes.
Okay.
Understandable.
Anybody else?
I hope your brother does well.
Thank you. He's doing okay. I just didn't want to miss the call.
No.
Yeah, for sure.
So Sarah, I still don't really understand what you're asking me to say yes to. Like, is it yes to an interpretation of how things should be read, or is it a yes to the design as it's being presented?
I think that one.
I didn't ask you, Pat. I asked.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm asking more as the design as presented.
I think the design is beautiful, but I have no idea if
Whether or not they need a
interpretation
variance.
is acceptable.
Exactly. Whether or not they need a variance.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Anybody else?
I mean,
Ken?
I agree with Charlie. That's my sentiment.
Okay.
we're being asked for a variance on height. And if the wall is built and the elevation changes, we're given the new elevation
Right.
number.
Right,
I mean, there may not even be a need for a variance if it's conforming.
right,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, I hate to do this to you guys. I hope you can tell by the amount of time we've dedicated to this tonight that I hate kicking this back to the planning board, but I just think that they need to come with a final plan, and if it needs a variance, we will hear it, and it'll take much less time because we'll know what we're deciding. But there's just nothing here for us to decide tonight until the planning board can give us a real answer. So I think I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn this to next month. You won't have to renotice it. Hopefully the planning board will have done their work and come back to us with something, if you indeed even need a variance, which again,
Right.
To everyone else's point, we just don't know that. So do I have a second on the adjournment?
I second.
Okay. And I will vote yes. Artie,
Yes.
Judd,
Yes?
Ken,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Rosie,
Yes.
John? Okay, great. So we are adjourned, and I am very sorry about that. Hopefully, we may not even see you next month, but if we do, I hope we'll be able to put this one to bed.
Let's hope next month it's if we have to come back, it's a 2 or 3 minute,
Yeah.
and we can roll it up. Thank you, guys,
We hope that for all of them. Okay, thank you,
very
Ben.
much.
Okay, the next matter is Chevron. Is there somebody who is here to be heard on that? Sarah, is there somebody here for Chevron?
John Malone.
Yes.
There is. Great. Oh,
Hello.
hello, John Malone. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thank you. So, John, let me just start before let me ask you first if service has been done on this and we're going to get that to the village hall?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Terrific.
Yes.
Let me just ask you, just before we start anything else, this is in Field Point, correct?
Correct.
They have a homeowners, I mean, they have to go through an approval process before it comes to us, don't they?
Yes, there's the HOA has looked at it and we just received approval recently this week. So we have approval from the HOA.
You do? Okay, because that was a little, we received quite a few letters on this one, and that was unclear to me at least, whether or not.
I don't think we have the formal approval on that, but we basically have the meeting approval. I don't think we have a written approval at this point to give you. So it was approved at a meeting. It was indicated to our client that it has approval.
God, am I going to adjourn everything this month? Can we go ahead and do it without formal approval from the homeowners association?
Well, I mean, I think, I don't know how you guys want to do it. Our understanding is that it's been approved. In the package that was submitted to you did not include a written approval from the HOA because we weren't clear that that was required. In order to get through planning board, obviously, we need to have a written approval by the HOA. So, I mean, I think they're considering get the variances, get us the approval from the HOA, and we won't finalize it until that point.
I'm of the opinion that I'd be more comfortable seeing a written approval with no conditions.
Yeah, because
And one of the submissions,
letters with that where we have conditions, you know.
yeah, and one of the submissions that we received on this seems to indicate that it was not approved.
Well, was that a submission or was that a letter from a neighbor? There certainly
was a letter from a
something.
neighbor, but then it attached something from the, well.
Oh, you're right. There was an
attached something from the Field Point Community Association Architectural Review Board.
Which is that different from the?
That is different. That is different from the HOA board. So.
Okay.
So, I mean.
Who answers to who on that? I
think I'm pretty sure the ARB reports to, yes, I believe that's how that works.
That the ARB of Field Point reports to the HOA,
board.
and they make a decision.
Yes.
I am not inclined to go ahead until we have a formal letter from the HOA, because as already says, there may be conditions on it which might change, and it just seems a little premature. But if you would like to preview this and maybe get an advisory opinion from us, because there were a lot of letters from neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, if we could hear the letters from neighbor, because those haven't been shared with us, I think that would be helpful, and we can show you what we're asking for. I guess that would be helpful. I know you guys have had a long night. If you want us to wait for the HOA, we can do that, but I think at least getting the info and the comments would be important.
Well, how many more applications do we have this evening?
2.
After this?
Yeah.
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the next door neighbor. Can I speak now? I don't want to.
Yes. Yes. What's your name?
Calvin Kamian, both with K's. And I had submitted a letter and an attachment. And I'm surprised in terms of the statement regarding the HOA, because I know the Architectural Review Board did deny the application. In multiple respects, what they're asking for goes well beyond what's referred to as the Field Point Design Guidelines for exterior alterations. And I gave some examples in my letter. And it's
we saw that.
Beyond anything that's ever existed in Field Point. They're looking for 513 square feet of the proposed porch and patio. And the guidelines are very specific that the Willow models, which is the largest model, can have more than 384. The proposed patio was 288 square feet and shows no dimensions as far as how far they can be from a flat wall. And the guidelines are very specific. They can be no more than 10 feet from a flat wall. The proposed porch is much larger than the permissible porch, 225 square feet as opposed to 140. So on that basis and on various other, that's some examples, and there are others, the Architecture Review Board, 5 members, denied the application.
Yeah.
So we haven't, and we also wrote to the homeowners, we haven't received anything regarding.
Well, that's why I think maybe this is just premature. I think we need to hear from, officially from the Field Point Homeowners Association. We need to have something in front of us that we know that they have signed off on. And then, you're more than welcome to come back and object if you want at that point anyway. I mean, it doesn't stop you from telling us that you don't like it or object to it, but we need to see what they have actually approved.
Yeah, I understand that. And we're looking forward to seeing it also.
Yep. So I think, John, maybe we'll.
Sarah, I agree with you on this one. I think we wait for the written. Are there any other letters or any other opinions that you could share with us, or you could share with us offline? So to make sure we have those addressed.
Well, I'm sure Sarah Palermo can give them whatever.
Yeah, whatever we got, Sarah Palermo can send.
Yeah, I think that would be best, and then we wait for the HOA board to provide approval.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so too. I think the homeowner just asked to be heard on something. Do you want to speak still, or should we?
No. I also want to make sure that, just so it's clear, there's a homeowners board. And then there's also the overall board for Field Point. And this obviously needs to be the overall board, which is a 9-member board. So I'm not sure which one he's referring to.
So I think,
yeah,
I think if the homeowner is here, which would be the Chevrons, if they want to speak, they're the ones who gave us this information, so they may be able to clarify. I don't know if it makes sense to do that now, but I'm sure if they're here to speak, maybe they could clarify. Is that what you meant, Sarah?
Yeah, that's what I meant. I thought maybe I'd just gotten a message. I'm not sure if I.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
This is Chow Chevron.
Yes.
And yes, we actually we appealed to the board. The Architecture Review Board did decline it based on our neighbor, Mr. Kamian, their concerns. But when we appealed it to the board, which was reviewed last Thursday at a board meeting, they all agreed. They agreed essentially to approve that we can move forward with this. And the managing agent for Field Point, Elizabeth Harthwaite, had indicated in the email to me the next morning that she was going to send me the approval by mail, but that essentially we could move forward with our plans.
All right, so why don't you get that to us, John, and we will get to you whatever objections there were. And we'll have a very long meeting in November where we will go through this again. But I don't think,
Sarah,
again, I just think we're a little early in the process.
Sarah, given that you've had that understanding of where it stands in the approval, do you want to do a preliminary now so that you can expedite it next time? Or
Yeah, why don't you just give us a quick
look
here, and we can give you some comments if it makes sense.
I think what's interesting about this is that it's a Field Point house, so that a lot of the zoning limitations that are related to typical properties in Irvington, there's a different condition up here, because I'm not sure that the development was developed around those zoning regulations in the way that we typically understand it. So I just wanted to go through that so you understand why we're proposing this. What the property's neighbor had explained is that these houses had certain options that were allowed when they were originally built, and there aren't, additions in general are not allowed by the Homeowners Association in Field Point, but certain modifications that could be included in a building when it was originally built are allowed. So in the one case, what we're proposing to do here is a screen porch. So a screen porch was an option that was allowed on these buildings when they were built. And that's why this is being considered. So I just wanted to understand it. So like if we wanted to do a 2-story addition that included a new kitchen and a bedroom above, that is not something that's why that doesn't come to you in Field Point. So there's limitations. But the screen porch is specific because it was an option that was allowed on the house when it was originally built, but wasn't chosen. So in terms of what we are doing, just quickly for the project, is this is the plan of the house. There's an existing dining room, existing family room next to the kitchen. And what we're proposing to do is add a screen porch in this area here, if you can see this outdoor patio, but it's a screen porch off of the family room. This is approximately the area where the screen porch would have been on the option, so we understand it. That screen porch is 1 story. It's basically a rectangle with screen windows in it and a flat roof. It coordinates in terms of what it looks like. It matches the finishes of the house, except it has a big open screen. The reason for this from our owners, as we understand it, is a bit, and it's not the only one that's in the office right now, but it's a COVID modification to the house where you think like, if this sticks around, I need to have a place that's ventilated where my kids can be with other kids. That was sort of what was driving it initially. In terms of how it lays out on the site plan and the variances that we're requesting, is if we look at this site plan, what you'll see is that there's the setbacks according to Irvington Code are as follows. It has a 35-yard front yard, 35 back, 15 side, and a second front along this side, this second front yard. What you'll see is that the building does not conform with any of those limitations for that lot. I think, when these were laid out, there may have been separate, as part of the subdivision policy, that they may have treated these lots differently. You see the garages in the front yard and, only a few feet away, 12 feet away from the front edge. This side, which is in the Irvington Code, is considered a front yard, was clearly not a front yard. The existing building is only 16 feet away. We are extending that nonconformity, but we're not going past that 16 feet, obviously. But the actual line is 35. The rear yard, similarly, like basically a large portion of the footprint of the existing house, which is original, is outside of this framework. So one way to think about it is I don't believe that this was ever considered a second front, when it was done. And I think there must have been other ways they were thinking about front yards in general, because in the development, there's a lot of garages that are
Right.
forward on the
Yes.
front yard. Now, in terms of building coverage, the houses did seem to be related to the original coverage, limitations for the, oh, hold on a second, I'm sorry. I clicked my thing too quickly. Related to the original coverage amounts. What has happened since 2011, which you guys know, is that the coverage limitations, originally, the way coverage was designed in the village is that substandard lots, so if you were in a 20,000 square foot area like this, you had a base coverage, which was based on a percentage of 20,000, which is in this case was, I think, about 33,000 square feet. I mean, 3,300 square feet. And if you had a substandard lot, you were not penalized for a substandard lot. The notion is like, you know, most of the lots are going to be 20,000. If there's one smaller, we would rather have the houses all the same size than have a shrunken house on a smaller lot in the same neighborhood. So the goal was, and that was typical in zoning at the time. In 2011, that was revised so that you only had coverage that was related to the actual lot size. In the neighborhood that this house is in, it is a one family 20, meaning a 2,000 square foot lot, but all the lots are 10,000 square feet. So all the lots are effectively half size in this neighborhood. So we put together a zoning analysis that sort of indicates that. So you'll see this is the neighborhood that we're in. Each of these lots, except for this corner lot that's this, but each of these lots on both sides of the lot are 10,000 square feet and under. So in 2011, when that code change was made, the coverage available for that lot was effectively cut in half. So, you know, the reason we are so high, and then in this coverage table, you'll see here, is the allowable coverage on these lots was originally 3,300, and they've all been significantly reduced, sort of cut in half where they once were. So you'll see our coverage, our existing coverage right now is 146 with the patio again, which the increase in the coverage, because there's already a patio out there, the increase in coverage is not as significant as that may seem. You'll see elsewhere in the neighborhood, we have, you know, 200, 229, and there's one that's actually, you know, relatively, the larger lot. So the larger lot is over only by 24% because that lot is not as substandard as the other lots, if that makes sense. So
talking about what, 300 square feet, a little bit more that you want to go up.
Right. And again, the patio is part of that request. So, you know, in terms of right now, there's a patio there that is similar to the size of the patio that we're showing in the project. We're moving it over, and the real addition is the screen porch. So the FAR is a similar condition because it is related to, it's not similar in the sense that there's been a reduction, but I think it's similar in the sense that I'm not sure what was driving the size of these buildings when they originally built. But if you see in terms of the FAR, we're treating, even though it's a screen porch, because it has screens in the window, it still counts as FAR. So we're showing an increase, and we're under 120 of allowable. There's other houses that are higher, but a lot of them are closer to what is allowable. It's not the same condition as the coverage. So that's just as a broad explanation of why we're coming in, because we typically do not come to you for variances like this. One other thing I wanted to show you just about the side yard is these are images of that front yard, which I think was originally treated as a side yard. It's completely screened by mature evergreens. I think it was always designed to be a side yard. There would be no view or impact to the street from what we're proposing, which is basically right in this area behind here. So as a quick argument, I did listen through Patty, so I'm going to shut my mouth. But that's stop talking, take a drink of water. But just to get you guys up to speed. So I don't know if there's any questions on that you want to discuss, but that's why we're coming to you with the variances. And we think, in terms of in the context of, what the potential benefit is to the client versus the impacts, we think that the impacts would be minimal. And then in terms of why a variance of this size, I think the explanation has to do mostly with this neighborhood and the specificity of this neighborhood and this development, and how we got to this point with that change in 2000.
Okay.
Hi, this is Mark Chevron again. And I just want to note that when the board reviewed our appeal last Thursday, they also indicated that they didn't understand why the initial disapproval from the ARB, because what we were proposing was very consistent with other similar models as ours in terms of the size of the screen porch and the patio, very consistent in terms of the scope and probably even conservative. And they also noted that it was well screened from along the road, and that it really, wouldn't be an obstruction for others. And so that, I think that's the driving factor for why we were able to win our appeal.
Okay.
And do we think all that wording will be in their approval?
Yes. And just please, hi, this is Mark Chevron and everything. Just on a side note, just note that the neighbor that is writing these letters and that got on Zoom, we don't get along with, and for years has caused havoc and turmoil toward us, our family, and other neighbors. So
I think that's highly insulting, has nothing to do with
I'm speaking and I listened. I kept quiet while you were
Yeah,
speaking.
but I zeroed in on the issue.
No, but I'm
about-
giving them the history of what you're doing toward us, as we have this. What we're proposing is same and similar to what you have.
Yeah,
And
we're not-
you
Why
have
don't
done
we-
that.
Accurate, because
All right, hold on. Stop it there. Thank you. We're gonna listen to what Field Point has to tell us. We'll get the documents. You will get each other's comments, so we'll all know we're on the same page in November, and we'll make a decision then. I think that's the only way to proceed from here. So that's the motion I'm going to make, which is to adjourn it to next month. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Artie? Yep, yes. Charles?
Yes.
Yes. All righty, what do we have here? Judd?
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Ken?
Yes.
Rosie?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
All righty, so that's what we're gonna do. So we will see you next month, and we'll all be, at least in terms of what information we have, and we'll all be on the same page, and we'll see what happens then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you, John. Okay, so Rockwell Contracting. Do we have anybody appearing on that one? Looks like we do. Okay.
Hello?
Hello, yes.
Oh, hi. Richard Blancato. I couldn't get unmuted, so. I am the attorney for the applicant, and this is an application for a variance of FAR. If you look at the site plan that we submitted, you'll see that the elevation, 3 of the elevations on the proposed house face streets. 2 of them face Dearman Close, and the rear of the house faces Stearns Ridge. By reason of the way the code is written, we have therefore 3 front yards. If we were only to consider the front yard, which where the front of the house and the front door is, no variances would be required. What happened is, in terms of history of this, when the subdivision was originally approved, the finished first floor elevation was at 413. Subsequent to that, the FAR provisions of the code were adopted. And when the applicant went in for site plan approval on the house, he had to do a elevation for the front for the first floor, finished floor of 404. That was approved. No variances were required. However, and a building permit was issued. However, when building started, it was discovered that a tremendous amount of rock blasting was necessary. And the applicant was not in favor of that, and the neighborhood was not in favor of that. So before the planning board and the building inspector, was suggested that the house be raised 2 feet. The only problem with that is, still the front yard, front of the house complies, but in the rear, it angles down to one corner where it's 6 feet instead of 4 feet high. And that makes the whole entire basement floor to be included for FAR. And that's why we need the variance. I think that it also should be noted that this is a steep lot, and the difference in grade from the front to the rear is 11 feet. So that makes a big difference in how you situate the house. But the principal thing is that it's 3 front yards. If there was only 1 front yard considered, there would be no problem. Just so you understand, the planning board, and I think wrote a letter of recommendation that it be granted. The planning board has reviewed this and is ready to approve it. Again, by way of history, the issues that you had in the prior application, or 2 applications ago, regarding the planning board versus zoning board and final approvals, that was raised years ago when Louis Lustenberger was chairman of the zoning board. He raised that issue just like you were raising it. And what happened is the planning board and the zoning board reached an accommodation because the planning board felt that if the zoning board put conditions on it, which were contrary to the planning board's approval, that they'd have to reopen it and do everything all over again, new public hearings. So they decided that they would bring it to the point where it was ready for approval and then send it to the zoning board for the variance. And that's the way all the applications have been handled ever since. So it's not anything new, but we understand why you're raising it, because a lot of planning boards approve stuff and say subject to a zoning board variance. But that apparently is not the way this planning board does it. So.
Does anybody have any questions? Any comments?
Yes, there is a neighbor raising their hand.
Alrighty.
Hi, Lori Davidowitz here again, 3 Stearns Ridge. As you can see, our neighborhood is very busy, and we are very anxious to have construction completed in our neighborhood at some point. I have a number of things that I'm confused on with this application, so bear with me and maybe you can answer some of my questions. The first one is, I believe there's an existing site easement that should be reflected on the current site plan, but I'm not seeing it on the plan that was submitted. So if you could fill me in on that. Secondly, I'm not sure how we went from blasting to needing a variance without ever talking about rock chipping or rock removal with a mechanical device. 7 homes, including mine, all needed some form of rock removal, and we all used rock chipping. I've never heard Ed or the building department ever favor blasting. The last point for me is that this is definitely the most visible house in our neighborhood, as Mr. Blancato mentioned. It's really visible fully from 3 sides, and it makes it, a very prized piece of property. We definitely want it to be a nicely built house that fits in. My concern is that if we go straight to a variance without considering the possible rock chipping, the house grows in height. Now, I completely understand that. they're not here for a height variance, they're here for FAR. But as a reflection of granting that variance, the house will grow taller, even though it would still be within the height code. So I would just like you to think about all those things and maybe share your thoughts on the any existing site variance and rock chipping versus blasting, why someone wouldn't do rock chipping. Thank you.
I can answer as best I can. Yes, there's no height variance required. It's less than the 35 feet, even with raising it 2 feet. Insofar as blasting versus chipping, Ed said at the planning board meeting that the ordinance allows both and that there's no real difference in the ordinance as to whether it's blasting or chipping, and the same requirements are for both. If it was chipping, it would take forever and it would be very noisy, and it would go on for weeks. So, we are not in favor of chipping or blasting. We would rather avoid both of them. Insofar as the site easement is concerned, I'll let our engineer answer that because I'm not familiar with that. And I believe he's on.
Before you continue with the site easement, there's actually, and I reviewed very carefully, the conditions concerning blasting versus rock chipping. And blasting.
I appreciate your question, but I mean, that's not really what's before us. So let me just go back to the basic question that I have. Where are you with the planning board? Because this seems to be
the planning board is ready to approve it, provided that the variance is granted. They have indicated that, I believe, in a letter to you, that they're in favor of it, and that.
Did anybody see that letter? I don't think I did.
They said they were sending you letters saying that they were in favor of it.
Did anybody else see them? Because I don't remember seeing that letter. I did see one on
No, I did not see it. I've not seen it.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. I did not see that either, but continue. So basically you're telling us that what they need is for us to make this decision on FAR and they're ready to go.
Yes, that's right. And just by raising it 2 feet, the only area of the house affected would be the rear corner, which would be 6 feet instead of 4 feet. The other sides are no problem, including the front. And it would void blasting completely. There'd be no blasting or chipping at all.
Anybody on the board want to be heard on this?
I'm just noticing, I know there are a lot of letters that were received in the last day or two, but there is one that Sarah circulated today at 2:00.
Right, it's an email, it's not a letter.
An email, right.
An email.
To all, Ed, Marianne, and I have discussed this application presently going to the ZBA. This is from Caesar. At the request of the applicant, due to a timing situation regarding a pending sales transaction, recall that the meeting was held as a carryover. Ed and the applicant have or will shortly settle the calculations for the FAR and the coverage, which were the reasons for the carryover. With those issues settled, it was decided that the applicant could now go to the ZBA once Ed was satisfied with the math. Marianne was okay with this new direction. The applicant still has to come back to the planning board after the ZBA.
That's correct.
So we're not being given exact numbers. Is that what I'm to take away from that? I think it is.
If the basement floor is eliminated, then the FAR complies. The basement floor is about.
You know what? It's been a long night, but this is getting a little ridiculous. The planning board has to do their job or else there's nothing for us to do. I make a motion to adjourn this. Does anybody second it? Thank you, Charlie. Okay, Ken, what do you say?
You just stretched your arms, Charlie, or did you vote yes?
That was a second.
I voted
I'm
yes.
taking it as a second. Artie, do you vote yes or no?
Of course I vote yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
John,
Yes, yes.
Judd,
Yes.
Rosie.
Yes.
All right, so we adjourn this until next month. Hopefully there will be an actual exact application in front of us and we will be able to hopefully move through it quite quickly. Thank you. Sykes, last case of the night. Is anybody here on that? I think I saw somebody who was, I think was on this earlier.
Sarah Plural's still around. Let she go home.
I don't blame her. I think she was home. Otherwise, she would have gone home.
Sorry, I thought I promoted him, but I guess it didn't. Sorry. Sorry for the delay.
No, not at all. Okay. Who do we have?
Someone who's muted, obviously.
I don't know what happened to the,
Hi, this is My Sykes. We're here and our experts are supposed to be here.
he was just here. I don't know where he went.
Give them a quick call. Maybe they went to the bathroom or something. I don't know.
No, he was listed here, but I don't know. Oh, here he is. Hold on a second.
I'll mute myself.
There he is.
Hello? You guys hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry. My internet was working fine through all the other meetings, but
Well, it might have given out.
I think it got a little tired.
Yes.
So I would love to be able to share my screen with you, but maybe I'll point my camera at it. I'm hoping I could make this quicker and simpler than some of the other applications. We are applying to add a pool. We're doing some other minor site improvements, minor regrading, raising a retaining wall ever so slightly. The planning board had some landscaping concerns that we took care of, and we are here for 2 variances. One for lot coverage and the second for having a pool in a side yard beyond the rearmost point of the house. I'll talk about the lot coverage first, and it affects the pool location too. This house was built at the turn of the last century. It was one of the first homes in that area. And at that time, the front of the house faced Broadway and the rear of the house faced the river. This house has remained substantially unchanged since it was built. It is actually a concrete house. It was built to be fireproof, and no owners wanted to take on doing any additions or modifications. So the lot coverage has been pretty much as it existed. And the actual lot coverage was 6,067 feet, where 4,889.9 is allowable. And by removing some old paths, patios that were no longer being used, we were able to reduce, and including the addition of the pool and some steps that we added, we were able to reduce the lot coverage to 6,011 square feet, which is about, I think, 56 foot reduction.
And that's when you include the pool.
Yes, including all pool steps. We stretched the retaining wall 4 or 5 feet.
So overall coverage is going down a bit.
Correct. James Doyle Design Associates are the landscape architects. And they, I thought, did a very nice design. They looked at the site, which, number one, the back of the house is the front of the house. The front of the house has a terrace, and there's also a screened porch adjacent to the pool. And those are the site's primary living areas. So they took like a very Beaux-Arts approach, and they put the pool in excess of that screened porch. It sites nicely. It also happens to be one of the flat areas of the property. The rear of the property slopes about 10 feet from the house to the edge of the property line. There's also a large hemlock tree, which is gorgeous. And there really is no way to have sited a pool behind the house without impacting that tree negatively. So for all of those reasons, adjacency, wrong location for where people live, and also not to fight the slope, the pool was put where it is located. And it complies with all the other setback requirements in terms of, side yard, et cetera. The only issue is that it's built beyond the rearmost edge of the house. Just think of what else I wanted to say. Yeah, and there are 7 pools in the immediate area. I incorrectly cited 6 as being in side yards. 5 are in side yards. So this meets precedent in the neighborhood. It also will really not be visible from the street. It's the Sykes house is slightly above, elevation-wise. That area is slightly above the street line, and it will be screened so that it will not be visible from the street. And the neighbor to the side, it's actually their rear yard, and Clifton Place cuts off at a sharp angle. So facing the pool from the neighbor's property, you'll never see anything built there because of the way that lot is configured. I don't know if there are any other questions. I don't want to keep talking. You guys have had a long night.
We have. Does anybody have any questions? Any board members? Anybody? I don't think there's anybody from the community, as far as I can see, who wants to speak on this, but is there?
Did I understand you to say that there are 6 or 7 other pools in the neighborhood, all of which have violations of the? Well,
they got variances. I assume they're not built in violation. There are 7.
I'm sorry.
You guys
that have variances.
Yes, there are 7 other pools. So pools are common in this area, and 5 of them are located in the side yard. So I assume they all got variances.
Anybody else have any questions or comments, concerns? Okay, well then I will make a motion since it's been a long night. I've been by the property, I've seen it. I mean, the coverage obviously is over, but this is a net reduction in coverage. And that's something that we've always looked pretty favorably on when you're reducing your coverage, even if you're over by a lot. And I've been by the property, and the placement of what they're proposing really, it does make sense. It's an older house. So it used to be sort of in a different spot relative to Broadway and everything, as you're saying, it was situated in a way that the neighborhood kind of changed around it. I think it makes sense. So I will make a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, then from top to bottom on my screen, Judd? Yes. Ken?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Artie?
Yes.
Rosie?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
All right, lucky number 5. That's the one that's getting through tonight. And so I will send you a letter this week granting the variance, and you know what to do from there.
Yep.
And
Thank you.
I thank everyone for hanging in there on a long night, and we have a lot on our agenda already for November, but hopefully we will be able to work through it much quicker than we were tonight. And maybe even one or two of these won't even be on us because they're not even sure they need variances.
I wanted to thank the board, and I'm glad I didn't go on too long.
No, thank you.
So
We
are
are
we.
too. Thank you.
Good night.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Sarah,
Good night.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, is there an appropriate way for us to send a message to the planning board about what our expectations are in general? Or I don't know politically how.
Right. Yeah, let me think about that. But we, I think we're sending a pretty good message tonight that we're not going to just do what approve things in advance of them being done. But I'm sure I can get that message through to them that they need to send us more complete applications. It happens from time to time. We go through sort of cycles with them. But we can't be giving variances when we don't really know what's necessary. It's just not possible. So I'll get that message through.
Good.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We have to make
Bye.
a motion to adjourn.
Yes, we are adjourned.
Okay.